Hello, and welcome everyone to AWS reInvent. My name is Palak, and I'm joined today here with Marcos, who's our Senior Solutions Architect, and Matthews, who's our Customer Representation from Azurion. So let's get started. Did you know that from the beginning of humanity till 2003, the data growth was about half a zettabyte? Now, in 2013 alone, just in 2 days, that much amount of data was recreated. The data has been growing steadily and exponentially, and in 2018, that number reached an estimated worth of 33 zettabytes. IDC expects that the data will keep on growing at a rate of 5.3 times, and by 2025, we expect that data to become 181 zettabytes. Now, just to give you a little bit of a perspective, 1 zettabyte equals to 1 trillion gigabytes. That's a lot of data. And while it's exciting, it poses interesting challenges for customers of all sizes, for our CIOs, our storage administrators, on how to protect and safeguard that data. So let me start by talking about, what is data protection in the context of this presentation. Data protection refers to strategies that one puts in place to safeguard critical, important data from loss, compromise, and corruption, and recover that data to an operational state to ensure business continuity. Our customers require a simple, cost-efficient, and a centralized management system to be able to protect their data. All right. Now, the AWS native services have data protection inbuilt based on the microservices architecture. However, the management of the data protection policies is all one-off based on the service type. Customers often use ProServe or professional services to write scripts to create data protection policies for the individual services. Now, this results into a sprawl of tech tools and additional hands required to manage that scripts and the policies associated with the services. This just results into siloed solutions per service. Moreover, when we talk to our customers, it is very clear that compliance is a key requirement. Majority of our customers not only use one type of resource. So for example, if they're protecting EFS, mostly they would be also working with EBS, Azure, Aurora, RDS, and other resources. So now to maintain compliance and report on the compliance of those data protection policies, it is very cumbersome to audit the logs manually through scripts and report on the compliance. Moreover, that approach is error-prone, can result into the customer being non-compliant. This siloed approach results into costly operations for the end customer. As a result of which, we listen to our customers. We always work backward from our customer requirements, and we decided to create AWS Backup solution. Talking to our customers, typically they fall into one of the 3 categories or topologies as described here. The first topology is where customers are running their applications on premises in their own data centers, and they are using software from backup vendors or media servers or backup appliances to back up or protect their data. The second topology is mostly due to the onset of cloud. Customers have started using applications on premises, but are using a target cloud to protect their data using, say, for example, a storage gateway. And the third topology is more cloud-native topology, where customers want to go ahead and run their applications on the cloud, and they also want to natively protect those applications within the same cloud. They want to be able to monitor, audit, and report on the compliance of your data protection policies natively from the cloud. We listened to our customers, and we worked backwards, and as a result of which, AWS Backup is available to solve for the hybrid and cloud-native use cases. This is what our customers wanted from us. With this brief introduction, I would like to invite Marcos here to talk through the solution and the architecture of AWS Backup. Marcos?
Thank you, Palak. Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Marcos Perez. I'm a storage specialist SA, part of the AWS Backup team. Let's go over how AWS Backup works, but even before that, can you show hands who is using AWS Backup currently right now? Okay, I see quite half of the audience. Thank you. So AWS Backup, as Palak mentioned, was created to simplify, to automate, to centralize the data protection, both for cloud and for on-premises. It's a managed service. So for those, you are familiar with managed service, basically we are taking out of the undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing, provisioning, servers, licensing, infrastructure, network, everything that you need to put together in order to put a solution together. With AWS Backup, you just opt in and you start using the service. That's the first step. The second step is quite important because most of the time you spend there creating your data protection strategy is the backup plan. So for those that are using already, you're familiar with the dashboard or using scripting or using CLI, SDK, you can create your backup plan. The backup plan encapsulates things like the frequencies of the backups, the retention, where the backups will be saved, any type of transition to code storage, lifecycle management policies, and so on. Once you define the backup plan, the frequencies, the retention, and all the policies, and then you start assigning resource. You can assign resource to a backup plan in two ways. You can do that pointing directly to the services or the resources that you want to protect, or, which is more common, customers are using tagging systems. So you just tag your resource, you select certain tags that you put on your backup plans, and then after you start tagging the resource and the multiple services you're protecting, you are able to activate the protection for those resources. You can further extend AWS Backup functionality with external components, external primitive components from AWS. For example, notification, log, audit trail, automation, so things like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, SNS, Event Bridge. You can connect that Event Bridge to a Lambda function that you generate reports on S3, and I start inventing a few new solutions right now, and Matt will share his experience later, creating those components, connecting those dots to generate a data protection strategy. Still talking about integration, AWS Backup integrates with AWS organizations. For those that are not familiar with organizations, you can manage multiple accounts and define policies and define controls for your accounts in a centralized fashion. So you go to your organizations, define the backup policies, once it's integrated with backup, and then you deploy all those policies and backup plans to the child accounts. You even can organize those policies in organization units or group of accounts. Every single backup that's created by AWS Backup is saved to a repository called Backup Vault. The Backup Vault is not a physical repository, it's not a physical storage, it's more of a logical construct, an abstraction layer that we created for two reasons. First reason, we want to make sure that AWS Backup is simple enough, so you can organize your backups, organize your recovery points in any fashion you want, by SLA, by business unit, by region, by account, so you can create the vaults the way you need to organize your backups. The second aspect, and also quite important, is security. We are providing a protection layer or a separation from the vault, where the recovery points will be saved, to the storage underneath. We are not exposing any APIs on that storage. So you're creating that separation will allow protection against intentional or non-intentional destruction of the data or access to the data or to the account once we have that separated and not exposed. The backup vault is still the security aspect. You can define IAM or identity access management policies to allow and deny access to the vaults. So that's a second line of defense to your backup vaults that you can customize according to your business requirements. Finally, the last point about Backup Vault is the vault lock. So as you can see the red lock over there. We have the option to activate the vault lock in any AWS Backup vault and transform that repository into a immutable backup repository, or a write once, read many backup appliance. This way, the data that's on a vault that's locked cannot be changed, cannot be deleted until the end of the expiration, no matter what user. Even a root user, for example, will not be able to delete or change or tamper in any way with the data that's inside a vault that's locked. Finally, protecting backups, restore is important, but in some cases, and Palak mentioned some of those use cases, you need to prove that you are protecting the data. You need to show proof of backup. You need to show to auditors reports showing if our backups are compliant with the regulations and the controls that we predefine, and if they are not, we can take actions to remediate that. We'll talk about Backup Audit Manager, and you see that we have part of AWS Backup will be able to take care of that. Today, I want to share with you 3 main use cases around data protection. I know there are several more possible utilizations for AWS Backup, but I want to focus on these 3 today, and Matt will share a little bit about their journey towards that compliance protection. The first use case is, as Palak mentioned, the cloud native. So we have customers that have their applications being born or being constructed from bottom up on the cloud, taking advantage of the resiliency, the flexibility of the cloud to create applications and solutions. With that myriad of components and services that we have available, also comes complexity, comes the challenges that we have to manage multiple services, protect them. So each one of those services may have or not a mechanism to take snapshots or to take backups, or sometimes there's different mechanisms on the same product. So how do I face this challenge? Having a central solution that will protect resources across the board. I'll talk a little bit more about this use case. Then the second use case that I want to share with you is the compliance one. So customers looking for follow regulation and industry requirements. They need to not just prove their adherence to those rules, but they also have to enforce some of them. So how we can provide that enforcement and how we can monitor our compliance posture. Finally, disaster recovery, quite common use case. I bet most of the audience here has some type of need around disaster recovery, creating a secondary response to any disaster happening to my first environment. So I'm assuming that most of the audience here is using 1, 2, or the 3 of those use cases or planning to do soon. So let's talk about some architecture, some use cases from customers that we are working on those use cases, and then Matt will talk about a Assyrian example. So here on the cloud native environment, so you can see that all my applications are running within AWS services, so I'm protecting components like ABS volumes, EC2 instances, RDS databases, S3 buckets, just to name a few. Right now, AWS Backup support all storage services available on AWS, from file, object, to block. We are supporting right now 6 different database services, just one recent launch, Redshift. And now we have this immense list of services and products that I'm using at the same time. Instead of having to go each one of those services and creating scripting, creating automation manually on those resources, AWS Backup is in the center of that architecture, providing the protection, providing the creation of the backups and the recovery points, so you can go back in time any point that you want. With the integration with organizations, you can even make it even simpler, because you can do that in a central fashion. You create the policies, you deploy the policies to all the child accounts. You see again that we have the vault and the option to the vault lock, and then you can restore that in a different availability zone. We have customers like a major software company here in the US that were struggling in the beginning of the journey on the cloud on protecting their resource. So they have these different services running. They had scripts creating their life cycle. So protecting data is important. Guaranteeing that you're not extending the retention beyond the point you want is important. They also guarantee that you're deleting those recovery points and creating that lifecycle management is important. AWS Backup will take care of that automation and that lifecycle management as well. Just give you an example on the Vault Lock. We have customers on the financial industry here in North America and in Europe that are adopting the Vault Lock as an additional layer to their ransomware protection strategy. So basically, you're not just creating the backups in a central fashion, so you have a central bunker account where you send all your backups, you copy all your backups to that central account, but you're also locking that account in a way that those recovery points will not be exposed. Finally, as you can see, you have a line connecting the two regions over there. AWS Backup will allow you, when you're creating the backup plan, to define a secondary region. So you can copy your backups to the secondary region to provide a separation from production and off-site backup in another region. This copy can be in the same account, or it can even be created like an air gap, a logical air gap scenario, sending that data to another account on the same or on a different region. When you provide that copy to a separate account, you will create this air gap, this logical air gap. The next use case is the Audit Manager. So using Backup Audit Manager to provide response to compliance challenges. So AWS Backup Audit Manager is part of AWS Backup. Is available on the side of the dashboard, and you can create their reports. First of all, AWS Backup Audit Manager will continually track every single activity on your backup environment. So all backups creation, all restores, all copies, they are being monitored by this resource. When you create a backup plan, it will also monitor and check the compliance controls for each one of those services. And once you have anything that's drifting off that posture, then you have alerts on your dashboard. You can activate additional logging connectivity to other services on AWS to provide you, for example, SNS, Event Bridge, provide you more information. Also part of Backup Audit Manager is the creation of custom controls. So you can define some controls to your backup policies, where you say, for example, I want to make sure that my backups are there for at least 7 years for certain types of resource. So you are able to go on the framework creation when you are using AWS Backup Audit Manager and define those controls and define those parameters. You have to do that the first time, so you make sure that you have a framework that is representing the requirements of your industry. And after you do that, all you have to do is check the dashboard and also reports available on Audit Manager. So we have periodic reports, we have on-demand reports, and those reports will show which resources are protected by those different controls. The last use case is about disaster recovery. And more than disaster recovery on a hybrid scenario. In a scenario where I have on-premises and cloud at the same time. So let's start with the left-hand side here, talking about backups. Backups will provide disaster recovery solution for your data with an RPO and RTO of a few minutes to hours. Is a solution that will give you the option to restore different points in time, so you can go back in time and select what points you want to restore. For ransomware protection, for example, multiple customers need that type of historic of data to go back in time. When we have that scenario of backup on a hybrid environment, we have a traditional data center, using traditional infrastructure, traditional software, backup appliances. But the difference is we point that backup appliance or that backup software towards a target on the cloud. We can do that in multiple ways, as you can see here. One of them is using AWS Storage Gateway to replicate data in the volume level or on the file level from your infrastructure all the way up to the cloud. The second option is still on the Storage Gateway family, is the Storage Gateway VTL or Virtual Tape Library, which will emulate a tape library to the traditional backup softwares. But every time you send data to that VTL, it will be pushed to AWS on S3 bucket. We also have options available from partners, different solutions available on Marketplace that you can use as a target for your backups. And finally, AWS Backup Gateway, which is part of AWS Backup Solution, was a gateway created to protect specifically VMware virtual machine workloads. So with AWS Backup Gateway right now, you can deploy appliance on your ESX cluster and start protecting that cluster. All the virtual machines available on that ESX will be listed on AWS Backup dashboard, and you will be able to tag them and protect them the same way you protect all the other services on the cloud. The second scenario is when you are looking for RTO and RPO closer to 0 or sub-millisecond RTO and RPO. So for that case, we have, as part of AWS Data Protection Solutions, ElasticDRS. ElasticDRS will provide a continuous replication from your infrastructure running on premises using agents that will talk to your application to create copies of your data continuously to the cloud. The way that the solutions here is architected, you will copy that data to a lightweight server on the cloud and a low-cost storage, creating a pilot-light style of disaster recovery, which means that you don't need to, you will not be charged for the full capacity and the full performance that you're looking on the cloud until you have to activate that disaster recovery environment. So that's what AWS ElasticDRS can provide. With that said, and after talking about those 3 use case scenarios, I would like to invite here to the stage Matt Valentine from Asurion, who will share his journey around AWS Backup Audit Manager. A round of applause for Matt Valentine.
Thank you, Marcos. I must say, this is probably the prettiest place I've ever talked about data protection. So, my name is Matt Valentine. I'm a solutions architect for Asurion. Asurion is a global tech care company that provides insurance, installation, repair, replacement, and 24/7 support for a wide range of technology, from cell phones and laptops to household appliances. Our 12,000 experts are available online, on the phone, in store, or will even come to you. Asurion eliminates the fears and frustrations associated with technology and ensures our 300 million customers get the most out of their devices and connections. So our 2 biggest challenges concerning data protection in AWS were, 1, ensuring that our data protection plans that are created in AWS adhere to our global protection standards that we have in other platforms. So if I take an application from on-prem and migrate it into AWS, I need to make sure that my backup schedules and my retention follow. The second is going to be preventing data sprawl due to non-compliant retention policies and orphan backups. So I am sure some of you have had to write scripts to find those orphaned EBS snapshots that have been sitting out there for a couple years. So our key goals when investigating a solution to resolve these challenges were the following: the need to report on compliance per backup status and adoption with the ability to extract or access that data for centralized reporting. And this goal right here is what started the whole investigation into a backup solution for AWS. You know, we're going through an internal audit, and we start looking through our backup application that we have at the time, and we start to realize, well, wait, the host that was here is now over here. So now I've got two different locations of trying to find out if I am compliant or not on my backups. So that was a really big one for us. The next is the ability to create a true air gap between production and backup data. The bad guys are not getting nice, or nicer, or better, whichever. They're not good. So we need to make sure that our backup data totally separated from our production data. Deployment, adoption, and management of the solution should be automated, non-intrusive to the resource, and easy to understand. No agents, none whatsoever. And then, finally, and one that was kind of important for me, is we have years of backup experience from the operations teams that I would love to combine with software and engineering. So those were our key goals. So now to the fun stuff. So how did we do it? So with AWS Backup, Asurion was able to deliver a standardized data protection framework across 200 accounts in 5 regions. So as we can see in the diagram, I've got it broken out into 3 sections. Each section represents an account in our environment. So if we look at the left, that first account, that's just a typical account that has resources that need protection. In the middle, we've got our organizations account for centralized management. And at the very end, we have, I call it a bit bunker, but you also refer to it as a data bunker. So that's my isolated air gap copy account. So starting in the account for the protected resources, we've got a CloudFormation stack that goes out and deploys an IAM role to manage the backups. We have a SNS topic that's deployed for immediate notifications of backup failures. We have a KMS key that's created, and then we're also creating a backup vault that has compliance lock applied. So moving over to our payer account, our organizations account, this is where we're managing our backup policies globally. So this is where we're creating our policies and attaching accounts where the protection is needed. In the middle, and one of the biggest pieces, is the reporting. So in partnership with our cloud governance team, we were able to create a Lambda that runs periodically throughout the day and scrapes the backup job status from all of the accounts and inserts that into an RDS table. So with that RDS table and a combination of multiple other RDS tables, we were able to create a centralized dashboard that shows our backup status and our adoption rates for resources that are supported by AWS Backup. And then on top of that, we go down to our compliance. So leveraging that same RDS table, we have a weekly Lambda that runs, and it's looking for resources that have failed more than 2 times in 7 days. So if a resource or a backup failure meets that criteria, what it's actually going to do is open up a ServiceNow incident for compliance tracking. Hey, we've had multiple failures. Whenever auditors come in, they want to see, how did you fix that? And this is how we track that. And then finally, in our Bitbunker account, you'll see that we've got a workflow that communicates with that SNS topic in the other account. So that SNS topic is subscribed to our SQSQ in that Bitbunker account that then takes that message, kicks off a Lambda that immediately posts to Slack or Teams for instant notification of, say, tier 1 applications that may have a backup failure or a copy failure, et cetera. And then finally in that Bitbucket account, we've got 2 locks. So this is how we're managing our air gap from production. So we've got one vault that has compliance lock applied, and this is part of our daily backup schedules. So this is where we're taking copies of backups that are part of our tier 1 applications and moving them into this account and ensuring that, hey, nobody else can touch them. And then the other vault is a vault that's used for long-term retention or final backup for resources. So with this vault, we apply governance lock. So if any requirements change for retention, we're able to quickly go in and adjust those where needed.
I have a question around what you just mentioned on the air gap solution.
Yes.
I bet a lot of customers here are thinking the same. I mean, this is a requirement for some industries for ransomware protection. How you implemented that air gap solution, and how was the challenges that you faced through that?
Yes. So I cover a little bit in my lessons learned because it was a massive lesson learned. Whenever we first started to roll out our backup framework, probably the mid 2019s, I didn't know any better, and I used the default KMS key for my vaults. So happy-go-lucky, everything's working great until we get to the ability to do cross-account copies with vaults. I go to implement, and I'm unable to do it. So what we had to do then was redeploy all of our stacks with the creation of a key that has a policy attached that allows for that cross-copy for the air gap.
Makes sense, makes sense. And I'm assuming it was a huge learning curve for your team to implement that. How was that adoption, and how was the learning curve?
Yes. So my background is in infrastructure. I've worked on storage for probably 20 plus years. So whenever we were initially going through this, I took in my development accounts. All right, so I've got my vault created, I've got my backup plans created, I've got my SNS topic for notifications, my IM role, and they go, all right, now I've got to do this 199 more times in other accounts. Mm-hmm. I had to learn CloudFormation. That was the only way that I could do it at scale.
Awesome. So infrastructure as a code was the way to do it. And one thing that I love about your bunker account is the way that you are integrating with so many different services and different primitives, and taking advantage of the Lambda to hear your events to trigger them based on the backups and the activities on your backup strategy, and then bringing that data somewhere else to use for different purposes. So that's really the type of thing that I was mentioning before, how AWS Backup can integrate and create a full solution using additional primitive services from AWS.
It's the more you go down the rabbit hole of how everything integrates, the brighter the light bulb gets. Hey, I can now do this, or I can now do that. And that's why you see I've got SNS topics that are doing cross-account subscriptions into SQS queues, kicking off Lambdas, posting to Teams, posting to Slack.
Perfect.
I'm trying to use everything available to be more efficient with our backups.
Perfect.
Yeah, to sum it all up, lessons learned. Marcos, you and I just talked about a couple of those. CloudFormation or an IaaS solution, not specifically, it doesn't have to be CloudFormation, but this was the only way that you could deploy at scale and make changes at scale. This was a big piece for us. Another one is easy to understand backup policy naming. So this was something that's, all right, so we're starting to work on our backup plans. We have backup plans that maybe doing a daily backup with only a 7-day retention. We may have others that now are including cross-copy accounts, cross-region accounts, et cetera. How do we make it easy for everybody to understand which backup plan does what? So what we did is we implemented the precious metals naming convention. So I've got bronze, I've got silver, I've got gold, and I've got platinum. And each one increases its retention requirements, maybe its frequency on the backups, and provides additional copies to either cross account or cross region. So that was very important. Marcos, we just covered KMS key. I will tell you, like CloudFormation, KMS takes some time to learn. I can't tell you how many times that we try to not only do the copy into the Bitbunker account, but then do the copy back into the production account. And then there's always one action that's missing. So it's like, okay, let me go back and figure out which one. No, my Cloud Gov team will not let me use star. So that was a challenge, and I highly recommend, hey, taking the time to really understand. Mm-hmm. Because I think with KMS, that is what's going to define your true air gap. So if I've got a production resource, it's using its own custom key in a production account, and now that I want to move it into or copy a backup into that Bitbunker account, not only am I moving it into an isolated account for that air gap, but now I'm using a separate KMS key. So even if that production KMS key gets compromised, I'm still able to recover the data over here. That was really big for us. Next is implementation of cost allocation tags on recovery points. You would be, may or may not, but whenever doing engagements with applications teams to drive adoption of AWS Backup, one of the first things that comes up is, how much is this going to cost me? So what we did is we applied cost allocation tags to each one of the recovery points. So now what we do is we leverage Cost Explorer that pulls that data out and adds it to that dashboard we were talking about. So now in that dashboard, we're tracking job runs, our job status, we're tracking adoption rates across all of our resources, as well as spend. And not only has it really been beneficial just to track spend, but it also the ability to immediately see the impact of a change. So say I need to increase the frequency of a backup schedule, or I need to extend their retention period, I can then see what that impact was financially. So that was really important to us. And then AWS Backup is just a part of your recovery strategy. So take the time to learn your RTOs and RPOs for your applications. Likely AWS Backup is just going to be a piece. We leverage DRS for EC2. We leverage Global DB for, I think it's Aurora, Global Tables for DynamoDB, et cetera. So take the time to understand, hey, what are my SLAs for recovery, and where does AWS Backup fit? AWS Backup is not going to be your solution for, say, a SLA of under an hour, but it's probably maybe a fit for 24 hours plus. So it's kind of, give and take on which best protection solution meets your first year recovery requirements, and then lastly, also your retention requirements. And then something I don't have up here, which was really important to me, is this engagement gave me the opportunity to build relationships with a lot of teams I probably wouldn't have had the chance to. And whenever I'm building these relationships, I'm working with our data governance team. I'm tied at the hip with our cloud governance team. Our DBAs are our biggest customers. So whenever I'm working with these teams, not only am I helping them protecting their data, but it's also opening up other opportunities to, hey, let me help you with your high availability. Let me help you with your cost savings. it just opens the door for more opportunities to spread AWS knowledge across our regions. So thank you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak. And Pollock, I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, Pollock will do some announcements around AWS Backup. And I'll ask Matt to sit a little bit because we have some time for some Q&A at the end of the session. Thanks so much, Matt.
All right. Thank you, Matt. It's a great story. So this week, we have a bunch of announcements, bunch of launches that have come out. We have launched Amazon S3 Backup for S3 cross-region, cross-account backups. We've also launched Amazon FSx on NetApp on ONTAP backups, and Amazon FSx for OpenZFS. I'm not going to read through the entire slide, but the point here is with all these launches, we have now covered 100% of our storage services in AWS natively. We can now protect 100% of our storage services natively on AWS. Like Matthew mentioned, compliance is a key requirement for many of our customers, and we hear you loud and clear. And as a result of which, working backwards from customer requirements, we have announced more controls on AWS Backup Audit Manager. We've also announced new retention modes for AWS Backup Vault Lock. AWS Backup has helped customers protect over an exabyte of data natively in AWS. And with the support of application-aware support for CloudFormation, we are extending our support for modern applications. Through the application-aware support for CloudFormation and infrastructure as code, customers can now protect, failover, and recover their entire applications. Moreover, we have also extended support for databases through supporting Amazon Redshift, which is a data warehouse solution that allows customers to analyze an exabyte of data and run complex analytical queries on top of that data, and a preview for SAP HANA on EC2. Also, as you scale the rules around handling data, this week we are also launching support for delegated administrators at the AWS organization level that allows customers to push the responsibilities and permissions of managing and recovering data closer to the personas closer to the applications without the need of member accounts accessing the management account. Like Matthew's mentioned, compliance is key. So last year we had launched AWS Backup Audit Manager. This year we are launching 3 new capabilities. One is cross-region, cross-account support for organization-wide monitoring, which allows customers to now monitor global organizations across regions and across accounts. Right? This is exactly the same use case that Matthew's had, is to be able to monitor and report on the compliance of your data protection policies globally. Moreover, we have also introduced legal hold that prevents deletion of data from your vaults, even though the lifecycle policies around that data has expired. You can only go ahead and delete the data once that legal hold has been removed from that vault. Moreover, AWS Vault Lock has been certified by Cohesed Associates to be used in environments subject to SEC 17A, FINRA, and CFTC regulations. This is what our customers in the banking, in the financial industries, and the brokerage firms have been asking of us. And we have worked backwards from their requirements, and that certification is now done. All right. So simplicity is one of the key tenets of the AWS backup architecture, right? And it's super simple to get started with the product. So all you have to do is first start by defining what your backup plan is and your backup policies are within that plan. Like Marcos mentioned, you start with your backup plans, define your retention policies within those backup plans. The second step is you go ahead and assign a resource. So for example, if you want to protect S3, you go ahead and assign an S3 resource to that backup plan. If you already have a backup plan that you want to reuse, then you can skip step 1 and just go ahead and assign that resource to that backup plan. And that's it, you're done. AWS Backup will now start managing your data based on the policies that you have defined for that particular resource. Moreover, step 3 is an important one, where you can go ahead and manage and monitor, audit, and report on the compliance of your data protection policies through AWS Backup Audit Manager. There are plenty of resources that are available to you to learn more about AWS Backup. Please do leverage them. And also, if you are an AWS Backup customer and you want to come up here next year on stage and share your story with us, we'll be very glad to have you on stage. So please connect with your account teams. Thank you, and I'm going to open it up for questions. There are 2 mics up in front on the left and right. So if there are any questions, we'll take them now.